History is not just kings, wars, and dead guys in wigs making bad decisions. It is also people pulling stunts so stupid, so bold, and so wildly out of control that they sparked riots, wrecked reputations, started wars, and fooled entire nations. This is 10 pranks that got so out of hand they changed history, and some of these make modern trolling look embarrassingly amateur. Number 1. The volcano that cried wolf, the Sitka Smoke Show. On April 1, 1974, the residents of Sitka, Alaska woke up to a sight that should have been the start of a disaster movie. Mount Edgecombe, a volcano that had been dormant for roughly 9,000 years, was suddenly belching thick, black, ominous smoke into the crisp morning air. In a town where the landscape is dominated by the sleeping giant, this was the ultimate nightmare scenario. People didn't just look out their windows, they started planning evacuations. The local authorities were flooded with calls, and the atmosphere in the town shifted from morning routine to existential dread in a matter of minutes. The culprit was not tectonic plates, but a local prankster and legend named Oliver "Porky" Bickar. Porky was a man who lived for the long game. He had been planning this specific stunt for over 3 years, waiting for the perfect weather conditions, specifically a clear day with high visibility, so the entire town could see his handiwork. He had collected hundreds of old tires, hired a helicopter pilot who was in on the joke, and flown the massive load of rubber directly into the crater of the volcano. Once inside the crater, Porky ignited the tires and used a massive amount of fuel to ensure the smoke was as black and terrifying as possible. To cap it off, he used giant wooden planks to stomp out the words "April Fool" in massive letters in the snow around the rim. The prank was so convincing that the Coast Guard sent a helicopter to investigate, fearing a catastrophic eruption was imminent. When the pilot looked down and saw the burning rubber and the giant snowy message, he reportedly burst out laughing. What makes this one beautiful is the sheer scale. It was not a whoopee cushion, it was landscape-level trolling. For one glorious morning, an entire Alaskan town thought nature itself had decided to join April Fool's Day. It remains one of the most famous pranks in history because it utilized the geography of the Earth itself as a prop. Porky even received a letter from the FAA later on, not for the smoke, but for the unauthorized flight, though the legend says he just framed it. It proved that with enough tires and a bit of a budget, you can make an entire population believe the world is ending. Number 2. The Canine King. Saur, the ruler of Norway. Medieval Scandinavia looked at many bad political ideas and still somehow found room for one more. During the 11th century, a time when power was settled with axes rather than ballots, King Eystein of Norway found himself dealing with a persistent and annoying rebellion in the district of Trondheim. Eystein was a man of cold, calculating humor. After finally crushing the rebels, he decided that traditional execution or imprisonment wasn't enough to break their spirit. He wanted to humiliate them so deeply that they would never dare rise up again. He offered the conquered locals a choice for their new ruler. They could be governed by his slave, or they could be governed by his dog, a Labrador-type hound named Saur. In a burst of pride so irrational it feels modern, the locals, offended by the idea of being ruled by a slave, chose the dog. They thought they were choosing the lesser of two insults. In reality, they were walking into one of the most elaborate political pranks in human history. Saur was not just a figurehead. According to the sagas, the dog was treated with the full dignity of the crown for 3 years. He was sat upon a literal throne at feasts. He wore a collar made of gold and silver. He had a dedicated staff of attendants whose sole job was to carry the king whenever the ground was muddy so his royal paws would not get dirty. Saur even signed royal decrees with a paw mark dipped in ink. The psychological toll on the Norwegian nobility was immense. They were forced to bow and provide counsel to a creature that was more interested in bones than bureaucracy.
The canine monarchy ended in exactly the sort of way a dog government ends: violent chaos. During a feast, a pack of wolves broke into the royal fold and attacked the livestock. True to his nature, the king jumped off his throne to join the fray and was promptly torn apart by the wolves. Whether every detail of the Heimskringla saga happened exactly like that is less important than the point. It survived as a legendary story of political humiliation, a conqueror saying, "Your rebellion was so embarrassing, I am replacing you with a pet." Number 3. The Berners Street Hoax, Theodore Hook's human DOS attack. In 1810, London was the center of the civilized world, which was the perfect stage for Theodore Hook to prove that he was the most bored man in the British Empire. Hook made a simple bet with his friend Samuel Bazley, claiming that he could turn any house in London into the most talked-about address in the city within 24 hours. He chose 54 Berners Street, a quiet home occupied by a respectable widow named Mrs. Tottenham, who had the misfortune of living in a house that Hook thought looked ordinary. Hook didn't just send a few letters. He spent weeks meticulously crafting thousands of fake orders, invitations, and pleas for help. On the morning of November 27th, the chaos began. At 5 a.m., a chimney sweep arrived at the door, then another, and then another. By the time the sun was up, 12 chimney sweeps were fighting for space on the doorstep. Then came the coal wagons, then the cake makers, then the piano tuners. Hook had essentially invented a distributed denial-of-service attack before computers existed, using the city's trade network as his botnet. The scale of the prank became legendary as the day progressed. It wasn't just tradesmen. Hook had sent forged letters to the highest authorities in the land. The governor of the Bank of England arrived. The Lord Mayor of London showed up in his carriage. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury made an appearance, believing he was there to attend to a dying woman. The street became so jammed with carriages, horses, and angry bakers that the entire neighborhood collapsed into a traffic apocalypse that required the police to clear. Hook watched the entire disaster from a rented room directly across the street, presumably sipping tea while the elite of London screamed at each other over undelivered coffins and unwanted pianos. The joke mattered because it exposed how easy it was to weaponize trust and bureaucracy. London's elite all came running because a piece of paper told them to. It was the first catfishing of a major world capital, proving that information, even false information, is the most powerful tool in the world.
Number 4. The Spaghetti Harvest, the BBC's great pasta hoax. In 1957, the BBC was the ultimate voice of authority. If the BBC said something, the British public believed it as gospel. On April 1st of that year, the current affairs program Panorama aired a 3-minute segment that would become the gold standard for media trolling. With a dead-serious tone and the prestigious voice of broadcaster Richard Dimbleby, the segment showed Swiss farmers in the town of Lugano carefully harvesting long strands of spaghetti from the branches of trees. The footage showed women carefully plucking the pasta and laying it out in the sun to dry. Dimbleby explained that the spaghetti weevil had been eliminated, leading to a bumper crop for the Swiss. At the time, spaghetti was a foreign and exotic food in post-war Britain, often sold in cans with tomato sauce. Many viewers genuinely had no idea how it was made. The prank worked beautifully because it combined a trusted voice with high-quality, realistic-looking footage. The fallout was immediate and hilarious. Hundreds of people contacted the BBC not to complain, but to ask for gardening advice. They wanted to know how they could grow their own spaghetti tree at home. The BBC's official response was legendary in its own right. Place a sprig of spaghetti in a tin of tomato sauce and hope for the best.
It was the ultimate fake news long before the term was ever coined, and it demonstrated a terrifyingly durable truth about human nature. This hoax changed media history because it proved that if a trusted voice says nonsense in a calm tone over nice footage, large numbers of people will absolutely invite that nonsense into their kitchen. It remains a mandatory case study in journalism schools around the world. It showed that the barrier between educational content and total absurdity is often nothing more than a well-tailored suit and a convincing accent. Number 5. Lord Byron's legal bear, the ultimate loophole. Cambridge University in the early 19th century was a place of strict tradition and even stricter rules. When a young, rebellious poet named Lord Byron arrived at Trinity College, he brought with him his beloved dog. The college authorities, citing a long-standing ban on dogs in student rooms, ordered Byron to remove the animal. Byron, who viewed rules as personal insults, didn't just get a quieter pet or hide the dog. He decided to find a loophole that would make the university look ridiculous. Byron went out and acquired a bear, a real, live, full-grown bear. When the shocked college deans confronted him, Byron reportedly pointed to the university statutes and noted that while they explicitly forbade dogs, they said absolutely nothing about bears. The university lawyers were stumped. Because the rules were so specific, they had no legal ground to evict the bear. Byron kept the bear in his rooms, taking it for walks on a leash, and reportedly even suggested that the bear should be allowed to apply for a fellowship. This wasn't just a student prank, it was legal comedy. Byron used the bear to demonstrate the absurdity of the institution's rigid bureaucracy. He was building his public identity as the glamorous rebel who treated serious institutions like stage props. The bear turned him from merely scandalous into a legend of the Romantic era. It was a message to the world that if you are clever enough and bold enough, you don't have to follow the rules. You can just rewrite the context. The story of the bear survived because it represents the ultimate victory of the individual over the institution. Cambridge could police barking, but they hadn't thought to future-proof the regulations against a dramatic poet with too much confidence and a literal apex predator. It showed that the best way to fight a boring rule is to obey it so literally that the result becomes a farce.
Number 6. The Captain of Köpenick, the Tailored Coup. In 1906, Wilhelm Voigt was a man with nothing to lose. He was an unemployed shoemaker and a former convict who had spent half his life in prison. He lived in the Imperial Germany, a society that was absolutely obsessed with military rank and uniforms. Voigt realized that in his country, people didn't respect the man, they respected the cloth the man was wearing. To test this theory, he decided to perform a prank that turned into a full-scale municipal hijacking. Voigt went to several second-hand shops and pieced together a Prussian captain's uniform. He put it on, walked into the street, and immediately found his power. He encountered 2 squads of real soldiers on their way back to the barracks. Using his captain's voice, he ordered them to follow him. Without asking for identification or written orders, the soldiers complied. They marched through the city of Berlin and boarded a train to the suburb of Köpenick. Once there, Voigt marched his soldiers into the town hall. He arrested the mayor and the treasurer on suspicion of irregular bookkeeping. He then ordered the treasurer to hand over all the city's funds, roughly 4,000 marks, for safekeeping. He even gave them a signed receipt, signed with his former prison number.
After securing the money, he ordered his soldiers to hold the building for half an hour while he reported to headquarters. He then walked to the train station, changed back into civilian clothes, and vanished. The prank became a national sensation because it exposed the cult of the uniform in Germany. Voigt hadn't used a weapon or a drop of blood. He had simply used a costume to beat the system. The Kaiser himself reportedly laughed when he heard the story, though the government was privately humiliated. It proved that authoritarian cultures have a central weakness. They obey the outfit before they question the person. Voigt's prank wasn't just a robbery, it was a psychological X-ray of a nation's soul. Number 7. The Phantom of Georgia Tech, George P. Burdell. In 1927, the administration at Georgia Tech made a clerical error that would birth the most successful non-existent student in American history. A student named William Smith received 2 registration forms by mistake. Instead of throwing the extra one away, he decided to enroll a fictional classmate named George P. Burdell. Smith didn't just sign the name once, he committed to the bit for years. He did the coursework for both identities, taking exams twice and turning in 2 sets of homework. Eventually, George P. Burdell graduated, but the prank didn't end with a diploma. The student body at Georgia Tech took the legend of Burdell and ran with it. During World War II, his name appeared on flight crews and ship manifests across the globe. He was credited with flying over 12 missions on a B-17 bomber. Whenever a new club was formed or a protest was organized, Burdell was the first one on the list. He became a campus phantom that the university simply couldn't exorcise. This mattered because it transformed from a simple student joke into institutional mythology. Burdell evolved into an unofficial mascot for student cleverness and anti-bureaucratic mischief. Even today, the university still deals with his ghost. He is frequently paged at football games, and he even topped the polls for Time magazine's Person of the Year in 2001 before they realized he wasn't real. Very few fake people outlive their creators, but Burdell did, because once a fake student enters a rigid system, the funniest thing possible is refusing to let him leave. He represents the triumph of the hacker culture at Georgia Tech, proving that a well-placed lie can become more real than the truth if enough people are willing to keep the joke alive.
Number 8. The Ems Dispatch, the world's deadliest edit. In 1870, Otto von Bismarck was the Prime Minister of Prussia, and he wanted a war. He knew that the only way to unite the German states into a single empire was to provoke France into attacking first, making Prussia look like the victim. He got his chance when a polite diplomatic encounter took place at the resort of Ems between the Prussian king Wilhelm I and the French ambassador. The king sent a telegram to Bismarck describing the meeting, which was civil but firm. Bismarck looked at the telegram and saw his opportunity. He didn't forge a new message, he simply edited the existing one. He removed the polite greetings and the diplomatic nuances, trimming the text so that it sounded like the Prussian king had abruptly and rudely dismissed the French ambassador. When Bismarck released this Ems dispatch to the press, it read like a cold-blooded insult. The result was a total explosion of rage in Paris. The French public felt their national honor had been spit upon. Napoleon III, falling directly into Bismarck's trap, declared war on Prussia.
This led to the Franco-Prussian War, the collapse of the French Second Empire, and the eventual unification of Germany. It was the world's first instance of weaponized punctuation. This is history's cleanest example of how tone can cause a catastrophe. Bismarck didn't need an army to start the conflict. He just needed a blue pencil and a deep understanding of human ego. He edited for maximum offense, proving that a troll with a geopolitical ambition is the most dangerous person in the room. One diplomatic text got snipped, and suddenly the entire continent of Europe was on fire. Number 9. The Dreadnought Hoax. The Navy versus the Beard. In 1910, the HMS Dreadnought was the pride of the British Royal Navy. It was the most powerful battleship in the world, a symbol of imperial might that was supposed to be impenetrable. Horace de Vere Cole, a legendary prankster, decided that this symbol of seriousness needed to be taken down a notch. He gathered a group of friends, including a young future literary giant named Virginia Woolf, and convinced them to help him prank the British military. The group darkened their faces with makeup, put on elaborate robes and fake beards, and arrived at the ship posing as a posse of Abyssinian royalty. They had sent a forged telegram ahead of time from the Foreign Office to ensure they were received with full honors. The Royal Navy, not wanting to cause a diplomatic incident with a foreign power, fell for it completely. They gave the royals a full secret tour of the ship's most advanced technology. The pranksters struggled not to laugh the entire time. Because they didn't actually speak any Abyssinian languages, they just muttered nonsense phrases like bunga bunga whenever they saw something impressive. The officers, terrified of looking uncultured, nodded along as if they understood. They even served the group a formal lunch, which the pranksters had to refuse because their fake beards would have fallen off if they tried to eat. The hoax was a massive embarrassment for the Navy when it was revealed in the newspapers. It showed that the Empire's most powerful weapon could be breached by a few bohemian artists with some spirit gum and a lot of confidence. It turned Virginia Woolf's circle into instant scandal material and proved that ceremony and uniforms are often just thin masks for total confusion. It was a live demonstration that imperial seriousness can be turned inside out by a well-dressed joke.
Number 10. The Cottingley Fairies, the girls who fooled Sherlock. In 1917, the world was a dark place. World War I was raging, and people were looking for anything that suggested there was still magic or wonder left in the universe. In the village of Cottingley, England, two young girls, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths, took a series of photographs that seemed to provide that hope. The photos showed the girls playing with tiny winged fairies dancing in the grass. The images were created using simple cardboard cutouts and hat pins, but to a public desperate for magic, they looked real. The most incredible part of the story isn't the prank itself, but the man who fell for it, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The creator of Sherlock Holmes, the world's most logical and observant detective, became the fairies' biggest champion. He was deep into spiritualism and believed the photos were scientific proof of the supernatural. Doyle published the images in the Strand magazine, turning the girls into a global sensation. Even as experts pointed out that the fairies looked remarkably like illustrations from a popular children's book, Doyle refused to back down.
The hoax lasted for over 60 years, with the girls only finally admitting the truth in the 1980s. They explained that they only meant to play a joke on their parents, but when a famous author got involved, they were too embarrassed to tell the truth. This mattered because it revealed a weird fault line in the human brain. Photography was a new, scientific medium, but fairy belief was ancient. Put them together, and even the smartest people in the world will start making terrible decisions with full sincerity. The girls hadn't just fooled their relatives, they had baited the machinery of human credibility itself, and it lunged. It showed that when we want to believe in something, our inner Sherlock is the first thing to disappear. So, settle this properly. Which one of these was the single most out-of-hand prank in history, and what absolute legend got robbed from this list? Drop the name, drop the incident, and defend your pick like a lunatic in the comments. If this video made you laugh, cringe, or lose even more faith in experts, hit like, subscribe, and stick around for more historical chaos.